welcome to worship here at Seaview, which stands for Coastal Virginia Unitarian Universalists. My name is Russell Roaring, and I'm a member of the board. For those of you who are newcomers today, whether it is in person or in Zoom, Seaview is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, a denomination that is part of a liberal religious tradition that goes back hundreds of years. Seaview offers an open door to all who recognize and honor our principles and the values from which they are derived: interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, and love, which is at the center of all of our values. These values call us into action, which makes us accountable to one another. Here at Seaview, our commitment to the work we are called to do through these values is demonstrated in our mission, which is to provide a nurturing community, foster courageous spiritual growth, and inspire compassionate action. It is with that love and commitment that we welcome all of you, member, friend, visitor, and everyone in between, to worship at Seaview and be a part of this journey with us. The title of today's service is A Lesson in Togetherness, Gay Liberation, and the Unitarian Church of Tidewater, and it will be led by Cathleen Rhodes, a master lecturer in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at Old Dominion University, and Liz Grunfeld, our worship service associate. Also assisting today with today's worship are Crystal Lennon, Stacia Sanders, and Reverend Mark Wise. For the time being, those of you who prefer to mask and sit next to others who are masked, we have set aside the balcony as a mask-only seating during the worship service. This does not mean that people who do not want to mask or who want to mask can't sit wherever they want, but we want to make sure that people who need or want to mask can feel comfortable in our space. This is just one more way we can be welcoming and inclusive to the many individuals who want to be an active part of this community. For those who want to sit in the balcony and do not have a mask with them, some masks have been placed up there for your convenience. After the service, you are invited to attend an in-person coffee hour in the social hall. Next week, the title of the service is Reclaiming the Flag, Embracing Patriotism, Humility, and Reparations, and it will be led by Martha Shore. I hope you'll join us. Once again, thank you for being with us this morning, and we hope you'll stay for the coffee hour.
Good morning, everyone. Our opening words today are All Life is Beautiful by Brian Keeley. Spirit of life, if you have a lesson for us, it is that all life is beautiful. We are each born into this world who we are, tall or short, with our own color of skin, with our own sexual orientation. How can anyone ever tell us we are anything less than beautiful or anything less than whole? We pray that this nation and every nation will remember their duty to protect human life, and particularly, we're thinking today about the lives of LGBTQ persons fleeing danger and death. We pray for those who are forced from their homelands and their cultures and their religions, not because of some fault or sin, but because of who they are, who are placed in grave danger simply for being the person they were born to be. We also pray for the enlightening of governments here and around the world who, with casual disregard for life, would deport those refugees back to their homelands and near certain death. All human beings are born free, equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience. May we all act towards one another in affirmation of our common humanity. And now let us worship together. Unitarian Universalists worldwide begin their services by lighting a chalice. And today, our chalice will be lit by Addie. Addie is 8 years old. She likes rainbows, unicorns, and mermaids. And let's say the words for our chalice lighting. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. And now please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, 1015, I Know I Can.
Though days be dark with storms,
And now let us enter into a moment of silence to mark this sacred space that we share. We will now close our silence and honor the different faith journeys we represent here in song.
Good morning, everyone. Is it on? How about now? So, any youth, young children, young at hearts, anyone here who want to come up? Good morning. Glad to see everyone. Addie, thank you. So, does everyone know what happened at the UU General Assembly? All right, we passed Article 2 revisions after many deliberations. So, we have an 8th principle, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. All right. Journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. We also agree to our values. Now, someone or something has come to Seaview this morning to sort of help you remember what our values are. It's a little mnemonic device, and I think Reverend Viola jumped the gun by posting it too soon, but she did. So we have Jet Pig, who has come to visit. And Jet Pig helps you to know what the values are. J stands for E stands for equity. T stands for Transformation. P stands for pluralism. The I stands for inter. And the G stands for generosity. All wrapped up in our concept of love. So this is Jet Pig. Jet Pig will be at Seaview to remind people, all of us, what our core values are. So remember, Jet Pig is here to help everyone remember. And hopefully, as the year goes on, the youth can come up with a name to call Jet Pig. But the Jet Pig is here. So, as part of our community, Kat was nice enough to bring us some pride flags. The last day of Pride is today, officially. But some of us like to celebrate it every day. So, the youth are coming around, and if you would like a flag, just let them know, and they'll give you one. All right? All right, youth. Take some flags and see if anyone wants. All right. All right, Kelly, you ready to take some? Remember to keep a flag for yourself. Do you want a flag? There you go. All right. Jet Pig is here to help you remember.
Now comes the time in our service when we invite you to make financial gifts that benefit and sustain the ongoing ministry of this church. Giving our time, talent, and treasure to the organizations that matter to us and that improve our lives and the lives of others is a spiritual practice for those of us who call ourselves Unitarian Universalist, and it is one that we should not shy away from. If you wish to donate by cash or check, you may deposit your gift in the basket that comes around. And if you would like to give electronically, the screen behind me provides a variety of ways that you can do that. And as you set your intention for giving, we will listen to another musical selection. Your donations will be gratefully received. I thank each and every one of you for your generosity today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Cathleen Rhodes. Kathleen is a master lecturer in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at Old Dominion University, where she has trained students in queer oral history collection, created the region's first student-led queer walking tour series, and helped develop ODU's new queer studies minor. In 2015, Rhodes founded the Tidewater Queer History Project and has since built Tidewater's largest digital repository of local queer history and physical archive of historical objects. She recently worked with a small team of ODU faculty, staff, and students to create an immersive virtual reality experience that recreates local LGBTQ spaces from the past. She also serves as the Director of Gay Cultural Studies at ODU, an initiative that supports LGBTQ research and creative projects among students and faculty. In addition to her academic work and community activism, Rhodes provides LGBTQ consulting services and training sessions to Hampton Roads businesses and organizations to create more inclusive and welcoming environments for LGBTQ+ citizens. She is a colleague and friend, and also her dog is so adorable. I just had to add that in. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. There is nothing I like to talk more about or hear more about than my dog, so special thanks for that. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm honored to be in your company and to have the opportunity to talk about the many connections between Unitarianism and local LGBTQ history. I'm also reminded that there are people in the audience who have lived the history I am about to recount. It is important to honor their work, their dedication, and their sacrifices. I think most of you are probably very familiar with the Unitarian Church of Norfolk, which for brevity I will refer to as UCN from here on out. But if you're not, in 1972, the UCN congregation settled into 739 Yarmouth Street in Norfolk, near the Chrysler Museum. And that's where it stayed until moving to the location that we're in here today. So while I'm referring to UCN throughout, this history is very much connected to CVUU. In recounting UCN's gay history, Will Frank, who is an ODU history professor and longtime member and historian of the Unitarian Church of Norfolk, started in the early 1950s with Reverend Aubrey Todd, writing that our church was split by our minister, a closeted bisexual who was caught in compromising situations that came to the attention of church leadership. It was the dark ages and nothing was handled right. Much of Aubrey Todd's time at the church from 1951 to 1955 would be marked by questions about his sexuality. It was also in 1951 that FBI and Naval Investigative Service records reveal an investigation of UCN members and possibly its leadership that was carried out over several months. It isn't clear whether the minister's sexuality was targeted in those UCN investigations, but during this time, known as the Lavender Scare, which was a period that coincided with McCarthyism, when gays and lesbians were investigated as threats to national security. And during that time, accusations of communist sympathies were often so entwined with homophobic sentiments that it can be impossible to separate the two. The FBI files inclusion of a letter to the editor of the Virginian Pilot, written by Reverend Todd, references to church leaders, comments from informants about at least one subject's so-called effeminate and peculiar nature, raised the possibility that Todd was one of the subjects under investigation, and that not just his political beliefs, but also his sexuality was facing scrutiny. It was a difficult period for the congregation. Will Frank writes, at least half of the congregation supported the minister staying, but the minister left as the church was split. It would also not be the only time that pressures gay people felt to stay closeted affected UCN. In 2006, Will Frank wrote that James Roche, who was the minister from 1988 to 1989, quote, resigned under controversy that split the search committee and the church due to his shifting from straight to gay orientation and not trusting the congregation enough to tell us. Frank added that Roche's frequent trips to New York kept him away from Norfolk, and that the next minister, quote, put the church back on an even keel after a traumatic previous year. The splits and trauma of Todd's and Roche's time as ministers demonstrate how divisive, painful, and complicated these situations were. But several ministers also moved forward thinking about homosexuality in various ways. James Curtis, a highly regarded and popular minister, gave his sermon, Loving All Lovers, in 1963, taking up the topic of homosexuality. He declared it neither unnatural nor immoral and addressed myths and stereotypes. And asking listeners to love all the lovers, all those whom we meet, he was not advocating a love the sin, hate the sin kind of love. Rather, he urged true acceptance of others while acknowledging that doing so might be an unusual and frightening prospect. It was a very progressive message for 1963, and Will Frank called Curtis's sermon, quote, one of the telling moments in our whole local church history. After the service, discussion groups were organized to provide an opportunity to process Reverend Curtis's message and to ask questions. By the 1970s, UCN's minister began performing weddings and ceremonies for those in the local gay community. And by the 1990s, the UCN had a highly respected lesbian minister, Mai Britt Johnson, who led the church for 7 years. Her visibility and connection to the gay community fostered many discussions that would move thinking forward on issues of sexuality and gender. Many times in its history, UCN members disagreed about how actively involved the church should be in gay matters, or if the subject should be brought up in conversation at all. The congregation actively grappled, collectively and individually, with feelings about homosexuality. And as imperfectly as these situations might have been handled, they likely informed a more open attitude toward homosexuality that made it easier for the activism of the 1970s. And here we get into the really good stuff. The 70s were an active time in the church and in the local gay community. Will Frank described it as a time of great movement without one specific center. Events occurred quickly and sometimes simultaneously. Could we have the next slide, please? Actually, one more. There we go, thank you. In September 1975, church members organized a worship service about gay and lesbian life, inviting Linda Woods, a local lesbian activist, to give the sermon. And what I have here, and sorry, I know you can't read that, I can see that now. But just know, these are historical documents actually from the archives that Will Frank donated to ODU. And so you don't have to be able to read it just to kind of get the sense of what's there. So they invited Linda Woods, a local lesbian activist, to give the sermon. The service was very well attended, and soon after, Leonard Matlovich, who had recently come out on the cover of Time magazine, the first person to do so, was invited to an evening event at the church to discuss his fight to stay in the Air Force. The room was packed that evening for a discussion with Matlovich and Linda Woods. Afterwards, tables were set up in the social hall for people, gay and straight, to talk. These came to be known as the Freedom to Be Yourself workshops, held on Tuesday nights in the fall of 1975 and into the summer of 1976, with 50 to 100 people showing up in the first few weeks. It was a time primed for action. Jim Early, in describing the harassment experienced at local gay bars like the Q Club in the early 70s, recounted that he and his partner would stash money in the trunk of the car for bail in case they were arrested. He recalled an evening at the Q when 5 or 6 plainclothes detectives entered the bar, fanned out, and watched the crowd for 10 or 15 minutes before escorting some men out of the bar. In a recent conversation, Fred Osgood told me that in the mid-70s, you, quote, couldn't even go to a bar and get a drink if you were queer because entrapment was common in those days. Then in 1976, 12 men were arrested in a raid on the Pantry, and that was a gay bar in downtown Norfolk. Their names were released, and there was a public trial. Tension was building, and the sense that something needed to be done grew in the gay community. Meanwhile, a small group, including Joseph McKay, who had recently attended a UU General Assembly meeting, was interested in organizing people locally. And this group got together and started to talk. Gay organizing in the area intensified and became closely connected with UCN. Next slide, please. The UUGC, which is referred to as the Unitarian Universalist Gay Caucus or gay community, depending on who you ask, it kind of went back and forth between those two names, was formed, and organizers planned a spaghetti dinner at the UCN on August 3rd, 1976, to get organized and gauge interest. It was an overwhelming success, and in describing the evening's events, this is one of my favorite stories from Fred Osgood, but he tells the story of having to run to the store for more spaghetti because so many people showed up, they didn't have enough. That's a good way to have an event, right? Not enough spaghetti. Within a month, the group had produced its first issue of a newsletter. Can we see that slide, please? All right, and this is the newsletter. It was one page with a hand-drawn logo and an explanation of its origins, but it would grow into a fully formed newspaper quickly. This paper, Our Own Community Press, known more generally as Our Own, would be an anchor in the local queer community for the next 22 years, staffed for most of that time by volunteers working out of the Unitarian Church of Norfolk. Next slide, please. All right. Couple of people that we know, right? The church provided free space in its tower in the early days, and then Our Own staff moved to a larger room in the church. Can we have the next one? Some more people we know. From 1976 to 1998, Our Own provided the local queer community with news, entertainment, book reviews, and a calendar of events. And it would serve as a template for two other queer newspapers in our area, The Paper and Out and About. Next slide, please. All right. Our Own would receive legal support from the ACLU and gain national attention in the gay press when it took on the Virginia Beach Public Library for changing distribution policies in relation to the gay newspaper. And by the way, the UCN approved without dissent a resolution for a public stand in April of 1980 in the midst of a large public struggle between Our Own and the Virginia Beach Public Library over this same issue. The congregation in that stand affirmed its support of UUGC and the group's mission and declared, quote, the dignity and worth of all human beings, irrespective of their sexual orientation. And I just wanted to give you a sense of what the paper, how it kind of evolved and what it looked like in the beginning versus what it looked like after that 22-year span. We can take the next slide, please. Work on Our Own also led to the Gay Information Line. This was a hotline that people could call for information about social events or to connect with resources in the area. And beginning in the late 70s, calls were taken in the UUGC office. And of course, remember, that's in the UCN. From 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. each day, and the hotline was staffed by volunteers. In 1979, Our Own estimated that the hotline was getting about 500 calls a month, and to this day, many people probably still remember dialing the number. Anybody remember it? There you go, Fred. A+ for Fred. It's impossible to overstate the importance of the UUGC and its creation of Our Own Community Press. In addition to its Tuesday night meetings, the UUGC organized the People's Coffee House events on Friday nights for socializing, held monthly potlucks, provided guest speakers to discuss being lesbian or gay in local classes, church groups, and other situations, and organized an annual conference that attracted attendees from around the region. They actually did a lot more, but I had to condense that. Our Own was the primary source of gay news in the area, with widespread distribution in southeastern Virginia and national distribution. It established Norfolk as a hub for much of the early organizing and community building, not just in this region, but in the state as a whole, and it remains important nearly 3 decades after its last issue, because so much of what we know about local LGBTQ history comes from its pages. Next slide, please. I borrowed part of the title for today's letter, hang on, let me start that over again. I borrowed part of the title for today's talk from a letter to the editor by Phyllis Stein. And in her letter, she says that she and her husband of 44 years learned their most valuable lessons about marriage. Quote, that it takes patience, love, and most of all, commitment to make it work. And they learned that, she says, from a lesbian friend who, Phyllis writes, Quote, didn't just teach with words. Every day of her life, she demonstrated decency and courage and compassion. I found this letter while doing research in the archives at Old Dominion University. Will Frank donated thousands of pages from his time as UCN historian to those archives. And as I read this letter from nearly 3 decades ago, written the same year I was finally coming to terms with being a lesbian, I was struck by the similarities of a long-term romantic relationship and the relationship between the Unitarian Church of Norfolk and the local gay community. Both required, as Phyllis said, patience, love, and most of all, commitment to make it work. That commitment has long existed in this congregation. The first time I ever went upstairs in the UCN building on Yarmouth was in 2017 when students in my queer studies class designed the first of what would become an annual walking tour of local LGBTQ history. We were about halfway through the tour when we made our way up Yarmouth Street and saw that 2 men were waiting for us with their telltale bright yellow signs. And can we have the next slide, please? Declaring homosex as sin. My students were shocked. Community members participating in the walking tour were shocked. I was shocked. Looking back, I can't believe actually that I didn't anticipate this possibility and prepare both myself and my students for it. But several years of legislative and judicial wins for LGBTQ rights had made me forget what I repeat to students every single year. And that is that liberation movements experience progress as a series of peaks and valleys, and that we must remain vigilant in the face of persistent prejudice. Though we were all surprised, my students were fantastic. As you can see here, they met the protesters with humor and joy. It was only later that we would process the more troubling aspects of the incident together. And what happened is we had several presentations left to get through at the Unitarian Church because so much gay history happened at that location. And it had been such a big part of early gay organizing in the area. But the protesters, there were only 2 of them, but they were very loud. And we were doing our best to get through it, right, and to hear those presentations when someone exited the church. And I thought, oh no. I met him kind of halfway. I introduced myself and explained why we were there. And then it got worse. He told me that there was a memorial service inside. I felt responsible for interrupting this solemn ceremony because the protesters were only there and only making so much noise because of us. But as I apologized, he invited us inside and away from the protesters. He escorted all 30 or so of us through the back door, and we could actually hear the memorial service in the sanctuary as he led us up the stairs. He took us to a large room and urged us to use it for as long as we needed. And our last slide, please. Thank you. Just as it had provided space for the UUGC and our own 4 decades prior, the Unitarian Church provided us shelter that day and affirmed us in the face of virulent homophobia and transphobia. Even through rocky periods, the commitment to make it work persisted. And as we continued to face setbacks and difficulties, we would do well to look to the past to remember a true lesson in togetherness. Thank you.
Well, I am speechless. I've just learned so much, and my heart is full. Thank you so much, Kathleen. You could have stayed standing up if you wanted, because we are now going to sing our closing hymn, 1019, Everything is Possible, and please rise in body or spirit.
the table, leftovers saved, wash the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in tight, at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are those who grow up strong and bold. There are those quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind. Some go in their own way and time. All people love differently in this world. Some have children, some never do. You can dream of a day never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they'll give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
Our closing words are Praise to You, the Web That Connects Us to Each Other by Amy Zucker Morgenstern. The Hindu god Indra is said to have created reality as a great net with jewels at each intersection of the threads. Every jewel is reflected in every other, and they are all connected by the infinite, intricate web. The jewels are sacred, and so is the net that connects them. And so I pray. Dear God, you are the between spaces of our lives. Where one hand reaches to touch another, you are there. Where eyes meet across the crowd and confusion and find understanding, you are there. Where the spark leaps from one mind to ignite another, that is you. Wherever we connect, you are the connection. Each of us is a jewel in Indra's net, shining like dew in a spider's web. Praise to you, the web that connects us one to another. When we are in the in-between, on our way from the intolerable to the unknown, when we define the categories that small minds invent and dare to imagine something beyond. When we seek others who are on a journey, on a threshold, on the margins, in any of the shimmering intersections of our lives. When we listen to the possibilities whispered within and step into mystery with trust, with fear, with trembling, may we find peace, for we dwell in your sacred place. And now I will say the words for extinguishing the chalice, and I will need Addie's help. Perfect. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you stay for the coffee hour.